We now move on to panel 1, entitled Evolution of Competition Law and Policy. This session brings together the heads of some of Europe's most prominent competition authorities who will share insights into how law and policy are adapting to new market realities. Please welcome our moderator, Mrs. Hara Nikolopoulou, Vice President of the Hellenic Competition Commission, and our distinguished speakers, Mr. Andreas Mund, President of the Bundeskartellamt, Mrs. Natalie Hartog, Director General of the Federal Competition Authority of Austria, Mrs. Cani Fernandez, President of the Spanish National Markets and Competition Commission, Mr. Martin Snoep, Chairman of the Netherlands Authority for Consumers and Markets, and Mr. Csaba Balac-Rigo, President of the Hungarian Competition Authority. Mrs. Vice President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. I think our panelists today need no further introduction. They are heads of the authorities of some of the most prominent competition authorities in the world. They have played a crucial, if not defining role in shaping competition policy in Europe and beyond, and we are truly honored to have you with us today. And I would like to start with a simple question, Andreas. Why is competition law important? Why do we need it? And why do we need competition authorities to enforce competition law?
Yeah, thank you very much, Hara. Thank you very much, Irene, for having me here today on this important panel. And congratulations, of course, 30 years, an important birthday. Yeah, Hara, your question is extremely fundamental, I must say. I think we have a couple of agencies here on the panel, and nevertheless, everyone might give a different answer to why competition is so important in her or in his respective country. I could name two reasons. The first reason is I come from Germany, and Germany has been the home of the so-called Freiburger Schule, the Freiburg School. And that was always the intellectual framework for competition law in Germany. It was founded, in fact, by three men: Eucken as an economist, Böhm and Grossmann-Dörth as lawyers. So you see already from the very beginning, lawyers and economists working together to do this job, as in any good competition agency today. And they set up these Freiburg theses as a demarcation to dictatorship and a planned economy. You know, we came out of World War II. Germany had always been the country of cartels. By the late 19th century, there were 2,000 cartels in Germany, registered. We had a cartel register. And the Freiburg School said something against this, against dictatorship, against a steered economy, a state that tries to take influence on the economy for its own sake under the Nazi regime. So I think this element of freedom for Germany is of utmost importance when it comes to the question why, in fact, we need competition. In Germany, we always say what democracy is in politics, competition is in the economy, a means to disempower companies, a means to prevent companies from gaining a too strong, a dominant position. So if freedom matters in the economy, competition is indispensable. The second reason, of course, is nothing can do for wealth what competition can do for wealth. This well-known invisible hand of competition that Adam Smith has already described, fostering low prices, good quality, innovation, how else do you want to get there? Only by competition. And this is why the most competitive countries in this world are the most successful countries. You know that in Germany we have also tried with a different economic system in Eastern Europe for decades. The result is well known. In fact, it was a disaster. It was a disaster not only from an economic point of view, also from a societal point of view, because freedom was missing. And we have seen in practice what happens if this is so. So, all this has been set up in our German Act Against Competition Restraints, the German competition law, which was titled by Ludwig Erhard, the constitutional law of the German economy. And I'm very convinced that especially in these turbulent times that we are going through, where I'm not sure in how far competition is really anchored in the minds of top policymakers, be it in Brussels, be it in Berlin, be it in other capitals. I think especially now we have to be extremely vigilant that competition is still as important for policymakers as it is for the society, for companies, and in the very end for the consumers, because in the very end the consumers, the citizens have to pay for everything.
Thank you very much, and thank you for showing us how it is important to look at competition's links with democracy and with basic rights of freedom. Natalie, would you like to give us your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's a good question to go to the basics and ask yourselves, do we need competition? What is it good for in the end? And in my daily work, I also see very different perspectives on this question. So it always depends who you ask and what your individual's interests are at the moment. So when small and medium enterprises come to the agency complaining about problems they have with the dominant undertaking at a different level of the chain, they think competition is very important. They want more competition on maybe the level like in the value chain before them, or maybe they want to have more diversification on the company side that buy products for them. So SMEs, in my experience, and this I think matches very well the surveys done by the European Commission, SMEs in Europe, by majority, think competition is very important. It's an important lifeline to keep markets open and give them an opportunity to grow and invest and innovate. So SMEs, usually, my experience also, small and medium enterprises like competition. Sometimes I fear they don't have enough of a voice at the European high policy level. They don't have enough of a voice in the public discussion. Then if you turn to like very big industries, so big players also in Austria, sometimes they like competition, sometimes they don't like competition. So they like competition when the authority can help them dealing also with dominant digital players or marketplaces, and they like competition. But of course, sometimes they are also the addressees of proceedings, and sometimes they want to see a merger done, and then there are competition issues, and then they like it a little less. So it depends on the perspective. Then, of course, you have big international dominant players. I mean, Peter Thiel, he says competition is for losers. So monopolists usually don't like competition because competition is the one thing that can endanger maybe the position they have in the market. And of course, it's very nice if you can have monopoly rents and if you can stay with this position as a monopolist. So monopolists usually don't like competition. Then when I talk to citizens in Austria, I think 10 years ago, if I would have asked them, do you like the competition authority, you like competition law? Many would have said, I have no idea who that is, what that agency is, and what you're talking about. I think we've done a great job in terms of advocacy. I think the cases we've done have shown the public that it's important. So I think now in Austria you would get the question, oh, the competition authority, they are important because they stop bid rigging. They make sure that public money is well spent on construction because there are no cartels. They stop cartels. They will also say probably, oh, they lower food prices, they lower energy prices. So I think there's some basic understanding of the dynamics of competition among citizens. So I would consider they think that competition law and policy plays an important role also for society. So I think it depends very much on the perspective you take, but overall, I think the basic principles that Andreas mentioned, how competition law and policy make sure that markets are open and that the economy works in a rule-based kind of framework, that it's not the state defining who are the winners, who are the champions, but it's market economy that defines who can be a champion. So the best company should be the champion, but not the company that does the best lobbying with policymakers. So there comes in independence. And I think there are very few jurisdictions in the world, like Europe, where competition authorities have such a strong status of independence. And I think it's a European value that we can also sell abroad. Why? Because it makes sure that companies face an impartial institution, the competition authority, which will only take into account what's in the law, that will only take into account facts, and it will make a very objective assessment. And I think that's a great asset in terms of investments, in terms of competitiveness, to have an impartial institution and actor. And my feedback from business is that they very much value that our authority acts independently from different calls, from different sides of the aisles in the political struggle for voters and also for, of course, best policies, because they want this stability and they need legal security for investments and for growth.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalie, for all these perspectives and for setting out how the answer to this question depends also on who answers, but I think that everybody agrees on its basic points. And we must not forget that competition is a process of rivalry. And in this process of rivalry, this has a result that some companies might like and some might not like. So thank you very much for this. I'd like to turn to you, Kani. Natalie touched on the issue of independence. Why do you think it is important when enforcing competition law to have these independent authorities enforcing it? And how do you see this independence?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much, President Sharper. It is a pleasure being here. Independence, well, a very timely question. You know that one of our colleagues that we like a lot, the current president of the ICN, the Mexican Competition Authority, has just now moved from an independence position to something more integrated in the like of, for example, what the DOJ is in or other institutions. And still I believe that they are going to continue the very good job that they are doing because the president is a president. I mean, this is a very important point. Independence is very important, but what counts is the people you put in front of the institutions. That's the point I would like to make, because the model may be the model it is, but you have to have people that are convinced with the task that it's incumbent upon us. As a general rule, the more independent a person or an authority is, the better it is not to be captured, be it by political power or by economic power. We always talk about the political inherence into our task. But let's not forget that at the end of the day, and I can say this because I am now in the middle of the last part of, we are also the energy regulator, not only the competition authority. We are now putting in place what's going to be the new regulation for the next 6 years in the regulatory energy sector. And there is no single day in which the media are not attacking the competition regulator authority, saying that we are not providing sufficient money. And we are doing what we are doing under technical rules and under the law. So it is really important that you can have the basics and the principles of your task embedded in your ADN. So that's one thing. There are many models. Europe, as you were saying, is a very good model for us. It allows us as well to have also the European Union backing our tasks, because we are, in fact, national competition authorities for the European competition regime. So we are not only national competition authorities, but in fact, we are the delegates of the European Commission in our main jurisdiction, and this allows us to be even more independent. And then just the last comment on why it matters that we believe in the task that we are doing is because we are providing goods and services at the best price to consumers. And I illustrate this, for example, with a recent study that we've made in Spain, assessing the impact of the liberalization of the railway sector. And we have been able to estimate that between 2019 and 2023, we have generated a positive impact in consumers of 578 million euros for high-speed rail passengers. That is what they have saved in these years due to the existence of competition. It's a very good example from monopoly to existing competition. If you say this for consumers, for companies, we have allowed entry. Whenever anyone has a superior idea or has the possibility of doing something better, they have to be able to go into the market. And this links with the democracy that we've been hearing. I mean, competition is there in order to open up markets so that anyone that has a good idea goes into the market. At the end, this creates also, it's a kind of a virtual circle that creates also positive impact in the macroeconomic elements. So that's all in all why we have to continue believing in competition, and we have to do it as our main task.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Martin, I'd very much like to hear your take on this, but there's also a very related subject, because one of the largest debates in recent years has been on the goals and the objectives of competition law, and there have been calls for competition law to advance social justice, to advance investment, and to support sustainability. How do you think that we can incorporate these goals into competition policy without getting into policy and risking losing our independence, but also risking the clarity and the focus of competition law objectives?
Yeah, thank you very much, Hara. Thank you very much, Irene, for the invitation, for the wonderful party to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Hellenic Competition Commission, which I think is a great achievement. It's a great testament to the country where such a strong institution has been set up and to serve the Greek public. Your question about the goal of competition, I think, is for my institution, for me personally as a professional, is pretty simple. The goal is the protection of competition. Competition as a process, competition in the structure of the market, that's the goal of competition. And why do we protect competition? Because the outcome of competition is generally favorable. It leads to low prices, it leads to better quality, it leads to more innovation, but it can also lead to more sustainability. It can also lead to more social justice. So it's not that competition should incorporate other goals. No, it's the protection of competition. And why is that important? Because it leads to other goals. Not always. And that we have to take into account. So it's not that if you leave competition free and unfettered as much as possible, in the end, it will be good for all of us. There are inherent market failures in any market. And I think our role as competition authority and as a consumer protection authority, as energy regulator, as economic institutions is to address these market failures and ensure that competitive markets lead to desirable social outcomes. I think that is the role that we have to play. And the protection of competition by independent competition agencies is so important because we have a lot of power. We have the power to impose fines, we have the power to impose orders on companies, to prohibit mergers. There are also other instruments. We have the power, and it's not necessarily a power as such, but it's the result that there will be civil damages that companies have to pay, that there may be, their reputation will be harmed. And therefore, because the weapons that competition authorities have are so powerful, it's also important that they are applied independently and indeed, what Natalie also was saying, impartially. I would say that independence and impartiality go hand in hand. It is important for us as independent agencies not only to be impartial, but also to be perceived as impartial. And that, I think, leads us, and which I think is interesting also referring to Andreas' comment, that competition law and competition authorities are part of a constitutional arrangement of the economy. That also leads to the idea that maybe competition authorities and other independent regulatory authorities are a sort of fourth branch of the government. So we have the traditional trias politica between the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, and maybe the agencies like us and others are a fourth branch of the government in order to make the economic markets work better for its citizens and for companies, and that we have to look at what the boundaries are. And that means that, like the three branches of government, also the fourth branch of government is restricted on the one hand by the rules that are enacted by the legislative branch and by the judicial review by the judicial branch, and the appointment is often done by the executive branch. So that means that we have a relationship with all three other branches of government while remaining an independent and separate from the three other branches. That is, I believe, important for a viable application of competition and other economic laws. It needs to be impartial, but also fact-based and rule-based. Impartiality means that facts are crucial. We not base our decisions on beliefs or ideology, but on the facts of the case, within the boundaries set by the legislative branch. And that system allows us to play our important role in the economy, in the economic constitution of the countries that we serve.
Thank you very much, and thank you for pointing out how independence and impartiality go hand in hand, and how important it is to make decisions based on facts, how difficult it is to exist as a somewhat fourth branch of the state, sitting somewhere in between the executive and the judiciary, and having such great power that we need to exercise with a great sense of responsibility and duty. Rigo, I'd like to return to the first question of this panel, which is why is competition law important? And if you would like to give us your take on this.
Thank you for the floor. First of all, I congratulate for your 30th anniversary, and it's a great honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and I especially thank you the cooperation between Hungarian Competition Authority, GBH, and Hellenic Competition Authority. Competition law, in my opinion, matters because it is the invisible infrastructure of the economy. When it works well, we barely notice it. Prices are competitive, innovation flows, and new firms can enter to the market. But when it fails, markets concentrate, choice shrinks, and consumers pay more. Competition law ensures that markets remain contestable. It prevents cartels that secretly tax consumers and restrains dominant firms from foreclosing rivals. But it also has a dynamic function. By keeping markets open, it encourages innovation and productivity growth. So competition law is not just about punishing and stopping harm and bad behavior. It is about preserving the conditions for long-term consumer welfare, innovation, and resilience in our economies. Why do we need independent competition authorities? We need independent competition authorities because the rules of market only work if they are enforced impartially. Imagine a referee in a football match who takes sides. For example, yesterday, Aikatin and PAOK. The whole game loses credibility if the referee in football takes sides. It is the same with the markets. If authorities are influenced by politics and by powerful companies, trust collapses. Our philosophy is simple in Hungary. A competition authority must be independent of the government, but never be independent of good governance. We are free from political influence, yet we remain part of democratic accountability. The balance is crucial. Independence gives legitimacy. Business may not like every decision, but they respect them if they believe the process is neutral and professional. And at the same time, independence doesn't mean isolation, because of our actions are reviewed by courts, guided by transparency, and judged by society. This is why independence, in my opinion, matters. It is what allows us to protect competition credibly, fairly, and in the long-term interest of consumers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you're very, very right to point out, amongst other things, that we can never be independent from good governments, and that is paramount for retaining our legitimization and our democratization. Thank you very much. I would like to return to you, Andreas, and come back to what we discussed a little bit earlier. How do you think that the objectives and the goals of competition law have been evolving in the last few years? Can competition authorities enforcing competition law support goals such as social justice, fairness, sustainability, employment, investment, innovation? What can we do to support goals that may not be directed to traditional goals of competition policy? And how do you see them changing throughout the years, if so?
Yeah, Hara, I think this is a very difficult question, because I firmly believe that competition law contributes to many of the aims that you have mentioned by itself. I mean, if you want to gain sustainability, if you want to gain growth, if you want to gain competitiveness, well, for all this, you need a prospering economy. And how do you get a prospering economy? By prospering companies. And you get prospering companies by competitive companies. So I think, in fact, if you have a legislator that builds up an economic-friendly framework with a lot of competition in it and a well-working competition agency, I think you will reach lots of these games just by yourself, because you are competitive as a country. I think it gets more difficult if you start to include all these objectives if you start to include all these objectives into the assessment of specific cases. Because I think then you run immediately the risk that you see a very high degree of politicization of competition law and the work of competition agencies. We are experts in competition. We are not experts, for example, in sustainability issues. It doesn't mean that we should not look at sustainability elements, maybe as efficiencies or whatever, but you can only do this to a very limited doses, because otherwise you get too much policy into competition and competition law, and we are not policy makers. And I think that is a little bit the difficult situation we are in. We are discussing policy options in the area of competition law, where we should discuss completely different topics. Our policymakers want to have champions, European champions. What is the way to create a European champion? You have to weaken competition law. They neglect very much that for the time being, they just don't do their homework. I mean, if you want to have a competitive landscape, you need to have good education. You need to have a good infrastructure, physically, digitally. You need low energy prices. You need a lot of things which we don't have in Europe for the time being. We're discussing the monetary union in Europe since decades. Are we working on that? I don't see it. We are discussing a telecom unit union in Europe. Do we see that? No. So I think all these talks about what we must achieve with regard to political goals is something like a diversion tactic, you know? There are lots of policymakers who do not want to do their homework because it's not very popular. And so the idea is, let's weaken competition law and let's inject some goals that we do not achieve into the application of competition law. And I think this is not a very good idea. And I think it is also up to us for the time being, telling them, let us do competition law. And we will deliver on many of the aims that you have mentioned. But if you want really Lisbon 2000, if you really want Europe to be the most competitive area in the world, there are lots of things that you need to do, and that cannot be done by us because we're not policymakers. You are the policymakers, and please start doing your homework now. You know, so there we have a very complex debate in my mind, and I would very much like to stick to what I can, the application of competition law, and not to be overwhelmed and over-freighted with policy goals that are left to those who are elected for that.
Natalie, what do you think? Do you agree that this could be a diversion or a strong emission creep, if I understand correctly? How do you think we could incorporate, if we should incorporate such goals into our assessment? Is it something we should at some point consider, or do you think that we risk something in clarity and focus if we go about this?
Yeah, thank you, Hara. So I'd like to come back to a point that you, Connie, made earlier, is that one thing is the guarantees we have in the laws for the independence, but the other thing, it also really matters who leads institutions like the competition agencies because of independence also. Because you can make a difference. We have the same legal framework, but I think one of the most powerful tools we have in competition law enforcement is the possibility to set priorities. I think that really differentiates us also from public prosecutors in their respective fields. And I think the Greek authority is a great example. I mean, I'd like to congratulate Irene and also Hara on your leadership. Like, we're doing great things together. We're doing the OECD project to fight the fight against bid rigging. Do we have to do it? Is it set in the law that we have to do this project and do this advocacy work? No, it's a possibility, but you can set the priority to do it. So I think with that power to set priorities, we can reflect ongoing challenges we have in our economies, we have in our societies. So it's not like competition authorities' work is completely static and everything we do is prescribed, but we have the possibility to set priorities according to the needs we see in our respective countries and in Europe, meaning that in which sectors do we conduct sector inquiries? We look into markets that are relevant for the economy, the people. We provide results that then policymakers can work with. I report directly to the Austrian Parliament. So I'm invited to hearings, closed sessions in the Austrian Parliament, and they ask me, so what are you doing? And then I can say, okay, we're doing this, and the results, you can use them. It's helpful for you in making policies. Also, even when it comes to cases, we can set priorities, and that really helps us because we can set a priority to pursue those cartels that are most harmful for our economies, that really endanger the trust our citizens have in the economy to work, in processes like tenders to work and not to be corrupted. So we can set priorities here. So I think yes, we should not try to insert goals in our case assessment that are not in the law. I think we're obliged to apply the laws and sound economics. But on the other hand, when we think about in which areas do we provide guidelines, where do we set priorities in terms of advocacy, where do we seek dialogue with businesses, do we do a campaign against speed rigging, do we do a sector inquiry in the energy market? There, I think we can have a very vivid dialogue with democratically elected leader and the government. And there also comes in another feature of the jobs of head of agencies, is that our job is also to communicate all the benefits that Andreas mentioned, because actually it's true. What we do already helps investments. What we do already helps competitiveness. But we have to communicate that and showcase it and support, of course, the work our governments need to do with our work.
Thank you. Thank you, and I very much agree with these points. This is something that we're very much trying to do at the Hellenic Competition Commission. Setting priorities is indeed a very powerful tool. There are certain things that we do, but there are certain things that we decide not to do, and filing cases and having reasoned decisions on why we decide to file or to stop an investigation or a complaint is a large part of what we're doing, and it can be contested in courts. So we have to put a lot of effort in deciding what to do and also what not to do. And on your second point, on the need to communicate what you're doing, again, I absolutely agree. And I agree we can have kind of sectors of priority. So, for example, the project that you mentioned that we're doing together on bid rigging, but we're also approaching this subject not only with advocacy, with all these workshops, but also with cases. So we have guides, we have fines, we have dawn raids. So it's an approach from many dimensions. And in terms of information, what we've been trying to do, I think, increasingly in the last few years is whenever we have a sector inquiry or a market mapping, we do a public consultation before we reach our results. And when we have a regulatory intervention, we have a public consultation. We invite all parties to submit their views. We take them into consideration always before reaching our final decisions. So very, very good points. Thank you. Kani, how do you think that competition policy is evolving, if it is, to serve any different objectives? And on the issue especially of industrial policy that has been put to the table, do you think that is a relationship that is of coexistence, or are they mutually exclusive?
Well, I think there is coexistence, and I think there is coexistence mainly because we don't live in a bubble. I mean, competition authorities, we live in the world, we try to make the economic environment of our countries better, and in order to do so, we have to pay attention to the trends of the economy. And we are now experiencing trends in which, compared to 20 years ago, the trends are changing dramatically. I mean, you talk about sustainability, and I could not agree more with Nathalie that we can go to that case by case when they affect dynamics of the market. Just to start, I mean, if there are efficiencies or something that are affecting dynamics of the market, we have to take them into account. So we are not aligned to things that have to do with industrial policy. If they affect the market, it will be for us to measure them and to provide them the adequate weight in our analysis. That's one thing. Second thing, you were mentioning, for example, priorities. Yeah, I mean, again, sustainability, to take it as an example of industrial policy, we have prioritized waste management, not only in our enforcement cases, because those were situations of monopoly in Spain. Now they are not a monopoly anymore, but we had to open abuse of dominant cases. Also, we conducted a market study in order to improve better what was waste management. Same thing with energy. If you talk about, for example, problems with unemployment, which is one of the things that we are experiencing as well, and you want to have another view from the competition point of view, many authorities have been dealing with labor markets. We are taking into account which are the sectors in which the economy, for example, in Spain is moving more in terms of employment. And for example, the tourism sector is one of a clear case. We imposed a fine on booking last year because we believed that the sector was going disrupted in a way by abuse of dominant position. So there are many ways in which we can go hand in hand with industrial policy. Another completely different thing is that we have to embrace industrial policy when it has to do, for example, with the creation of national champions. And I now will refer to the comments that Andrea was doing. I mean, 1 year after the Draghi and Letta reports, one of the things that we don't see is simplification, for example. I mean, we know that we have a problem in competitiveness in Europe, and competitiveness is not competition, but they are complementary. How can we help in competitiveness? Well, we can help in allowing our companies to grow in a scale. But yeah, when you believe that we have a potential of 450 million consumers, but in fact, we are still national markets for telecoms. I mean, one of the criticisms to competition authorities is that we don't allow a scale for competition for telecom operators, and therefore they cannot compete at the same level as American companies, for example. Well, the spectrum is still national. If you want to have a huge company in telecoms that is able to provide services for 450 million consumers, then why don't you mutualize the spectrum? But still, it is in the hands of the member states. Again, for energy, we have a potential of renewable energy from the south to the north, and we don't have interconnection. And we are there are already infringements on the interconnection percentage that should have been achieved by today. The Commission should open infringement procedures on that. We have problems with the interconnection of many other things, railways, for example, which also would help sustainability. And still, we face lots of problems when companies try to go from one country to another. Not to talk about the financial sector, where even mergers between banks that are in the same country are opposed for reasons that are completely aligned to competition. So we have, of course, to do our job, and I think there are many things in which we can do it, with enforcement priorities, with advocacy, but it is true that we can help more if those that have the power to interconnect our markets are doing their job as well.
Thank you very much. Yes, I would agree that deepening the single market in sectors, as you mentioned, telecoms, finance, energy, capital market is crucial for actually being able to take advantage of all that the European Union can give us. Martin, how do you see this? Do you see that there is the relationship between competition policy and industrial policy? Also, we mentioned national champions. Do you think that competition law is in the way of scaling up?
That's difficult to answer in a general way, but I think go back first to the goal of competition, which was to protect competition. The goal of competition law is to protect competition. But like I said earlier, competition does not always lead to the best long-term results. For example, that's why we need environmental regulation. That's why there are other interventions necessary in order for societies to thrive. And sometimes the legislator has given independent competition authorities the power to balance anti-competitive effects against other public benefits. It's done in different laws in different ways, and sometimes in the same law in different ways. But nevertheless, there are instances where the democratically elected legislator gave the power to independent competition authorities to balance anti-competitive effects against benefits. And I think when we look at the history and the development of competition law, initially this power was applied, freely. And then there was a time that started in the early 90s where this power to balance the two became more limited. And there was the idea that no, the competition authorities should only focus on efficiencies or should only focus on a very narrow set of exceptions. That makes our life easier as competition authority, because then simply we can say, okay, yeah, we looked at these are anti-competitive effects, and we only look at very few other benefits, and therefore, we impose a fine or we prohibit the merger. And yes, there may be other public benefits, but that's for others, not for us. And I think that is too easy in today's society, and it also does not do justice to the mandate that was explicitly given to independent authorities. And therefore, we should, on certain circumstances, should revisit this and think again on what is in the law, what was actually intention of the legislator, of the mandate given to the independent agencies, and then apply that. And I realize how difficult it is. It's difficult if you want to remain fact-based. It's difficult if you want to remain independent. It's difficult if you want to remain rule-based, because these are very open norms. But nevertheless, it is important to pick up this task as an independent agency. We did so a number of years ago when we started out looking at sustainability and the prevention of CO2 emissions as a benefit. And we endeavored together with, in a very transparent and open way with the European Commission, with many of my colleague authorities, on how we could objectively look at environmental benefits and how we could balance them against anti-competitive effects. And I think the same trajectory we could now take with possible other benefits that we need to include in our analysis. For example, how do we improve the resilience of the European economy? And it's difficult, and it's easy to become a puppet of lobby interests, of political interests, but the fact that it's difficult should not stop us from doing it. And it's hard, and we believe strongly that if we do this in a fact-based, transparent and open way, that is subject to judicial review, we can add value to our roles in society.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. And thank you for for reminding us of how important it is in all this procedure and these assessments to remain transparent, to keep our decisions fact-based, to keep our independence, and how and what can we do to improve resilience. So excellent points on this. I think that at the end, if we put together a puzzle of what each of you have pointed out, it could be a set of priorities or strategic guidance for any competition authorities. Thank you very much. Rigo, what about Hungary, and how do you see it as head of your authority and this evolution of goals and objectives of competition law?
In Hungary, competition policy is evolving, definitely, because markets evolving also. 30 years ago, the focus was mostly on cartels in traditional industries like steel, cement, transport. Today, the challenges are different. Digital platforms, data, artificial intelligence, and global supply chains. The OECD's latest competition trends report shows a 30% increase in digital market investigations over just the past 5 years. That tells us how quickly the landscape is shifting. We now discussed whether algorithms can coordinate prices, or how a few big tech firms can act as gatekeepers for entire markets. And in Europe, new ex-ante tools like the Digital Market Act have been introduced precisely for these realities. By evolution is also very important. I think in Hungary, the policymakers can influence competition authorities also, but the most important, consumer welfare, I think. This is the main question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this, for these insights. I would like now to return to Andreas Mundt. And there's been a lot of discussion, also within the context of the goals and objectives and what competition can do, about merger control. We've all seen it in the Draghi report. The merger guidelines are under review. The European Commission system of merger control has been a very successful one. Thousands of cases, national regimes operating more or less along the lines of the European Commission. With hundreds, thousands of national decisions in the last few years. But do you think that there is a reason at this point to revisit our approach to merger control, to fundamentally reassess how we look at mergers?
I would say definitely not. Not fundamentally. I firmly believe that competition law has to evolve constantly. And that is just a consequence of the fact that we are, in a way, economy-driven authorities, which means we have to keep pace with the economy, with the companies, be it in strict enforcement in cartels, be it if we are advisors. I think that is a new role to a certain extent of all of us, that we are also advisors, how you can cooperate on certain matters and how not. That has to evolve. And of course, it is fine from time to time to look at your merger regime. But that does not mean that you should change it fundamentally from time to time. And if you look at the Draghi report, just as an example, I find it remarkable that Draghi does not recommend a fundamental change in merger control. The only area he mentions is telecoms. This is the only part in which I do not agree with Draghi. But I agree very much with the part where he does not recommend fundamental changes. And this is why I personally find the context in which the revision of the merger guidelines is put now, I find it a little bit worrisome because I do not know where the Commission is heading to. There is this question of the relationship between merger control, sustainability, digitalization, jobs, growth, competitiveness. And I would say, yes, fine, we contribute to these goals by taking care by our merger control that we have competitive companies and that our economy is competitive. But the context of the text looks a little bit different. It looks little bit like, does merger control get in the way of achieving these aims? And I don't think this would be the right way to think of it. As I said, I'm not sure how to interpret what I see there. But as I said, I see some danger. And if this goes along with this current and constant debate about champions and how we create European champions, I would say we do not have to create European champions, definitely not by relaxing our merger control rules. Champions have to evolve. I think also competition agencies like champions. We need them. I mean, they are clusters in our countries for skills, for manufacturing, for lots of things. So we need these kind of champions, but please, champions on the merits. Champions not by state intervention, not by state subsidies, but champions because they are competitive in their home markets. And I firmly believe that companies will only be successful in the world if they are successful on their home market. So, no, I do not believe we have to change something fundamentally. Definitely not with regard to the champion debate. And here, I'm not going to repeat myself. Here it is up to the policymakers to take care, finally, after decades of discussion, to take care of a framework in which the European area can become really competitive. And it is obvious that we have not done very well in this respect if you look at Europe at the current status it's in. And this is why we have this debate about our competitiveness. But again, this is not going to be achieved by overhauling the merger regime completely. Let's leave it as it is, fine-tuning always, but no fundamental changes. It's up to others to care for the competitiveness of the EEA.
Thank you. Thank you very much on these excellent points. I fully agree on what you say, and I'd also like to stress that competition authorities do like champions. They are clusters of skills. They are clusters of talent, of manufacturing, provided that they are champions that have evolved, that have reached this place as a result of their good performance. Speaking also of fine-tuning merger control, and since we're at a Greek audience and the minister earlier hinted on this, some fine-tuning that we will be doing to our national merger control system, which I think will bring it more in line with what is happening in the rest of Europe, is that the standstill obligation, of course, remains, but there will be no longer a specific time period to notify a merger after concluding the SPA. So mergers will have to be submitted for approval. There is a standstill obligation, but there is no specific time limit from the signing of the agreement. This is a proposal that will, as the Minister said, will be brought forward for discussion, but I support it, and I think that it will bring us more in line with merger control, and we will be able to have notifications of a high quality, which is in the interests of both the Commission and the parties. Thank you. Natalie, what do you think on the relationship between, on how merger control should be evolving? Do we need to revisit it? Is it standing in the way of national champions or European champions? Do we need to relax merger control a little bit?
So first of all, I fully subscribe to everything Andreas said, so I can just build on that. Maybe just adding a few points from my perspective. So this idea of big champions, usually I'm addressed with a question in that direction when I talk to big business. Because when I talk to SMEs, SMEs benefit a lot from merger control. And if I look at the mergers we have sent to phase 2 or where we imposed remedies or which were blocked, the complaints or the companies that would have suffered from that merger were always SMEs. So they're the ones really stepping in, stepping forward, calling us, saying like, pay attention, this merger might be problematic, and so on. So SMEs are usually pro-merger control, and I think their voice is not being heard enough, also in the European, but also at the national level, when you discuss merger control, because they don't have a unified big voice, and they usually don't have time to think about policy, participating in policy-making processes. But usually when I talk to big business, then I get this question on why do you never take into account global competition and merger control? And then I'm always confused because we always take into account the reality of the markets. If it's a global market, then we'll define it globally. If it's a regional market, we'll define it regionally. Like, we always take into account the facts on the ground, and also, of course, it's a future-looking process. So we also look into what happens in the future. We take this into account as well. And so when I think about the Siemens-Alstom decision that was taken at the European level, I don't think it was a bad decision, but I think we can learn from that decision in terms of communication, because I think it's the most misunderstood decision that I know of. And I've explained that case, I think, 1,000 times, and so I have a narrative on that. But I wish we could have maybe anticipated it more and maybe have started earlier on with communication. So I think it's very important that since, as it was mentioned, competition authorities do have power on the economy. We have the power to limit big economic power, and that hurts sometimes. And of course, that creates reactions of very powerful players and people, right? The people behind big economic power. And so we have to do a very, very good job at communicating why a decision is taken in a certain way. And I think this is where competition authorities across Europe and also the European Competition Network, I think we can still learn and do much better job together in explaining the job we do. Another point I would like to mention, I think what we have also to include in our narrative, and is important to highlight, is also a point you, Kani, made about it would be good to have more of a single market in energy, in telecoms, and I think competition authorities are all in for the single market. I think we're all in. But what we cannot accept is if we still have national or regional markets, and then we get a call for consolidation, which will only bring more cost for our SMEs and our citizens, and that is being brought as an argument behind like an umbrella of, oh, we need European competitiveness. It's not a European market. So you can please buy another competitor in another member state, but if the sole goal is consolidation and more profits in the regional or national market, and that's going to be an additional cost for 98% of businesses in Austria because they're SMEs, that I'm not in for that as a competition authority. So I think we need to, if we talk about this question. I think we need to go to the nitty-gritty details, like which cases are you talking about? What are you exactly talking about? Where are the exact benefits? Who is going to define who is the champion? Is it going to be defined by, I don't know, is the Austrian Chancellor, or the German Chancellor, or is it going to be the President of the European Commission? Like, what are we talking about exactly? Are we moving away in the debate from like a market-based economy where the champions are the companies that compete best? So I think it's important to not stay on the superficies of that debate, but then really dive deep. Where are the problems? What are we looking to solve exactly?
Yes, absolutely right. We need to make sure that we know what we're talking about instead of making generalizations that are sometimes caused by miscommunication, also by lack of communication. And Kani, how do you see this subject? We have, as I said, we have the merger guidelines under review. Do you think we should reassess our approach to mergers, and in what way?
Well, I think that, as Andrea was saying, it's always good to review what you are doing in order to see whether you are doing right or there are things that just should be adjusting. But I think that the framework that we have in merger control at the European scale is flexible enough to pay attention to the trends that are more and more important. And Saba was saying that, for example, 20 years ago, we were more focused in markets like cement or steel or construction. Now we are much more focused on digital data and things like that. And it is true that in that respect, we have to make sure that we have the tools that we need in order to tackle the new issues. But having said so, it is true that, for example, innovation, which is one of the things that it is clearly claimed for in both the Draghi and the Letta report, and this call for protecting innovation, fostering innovation, and in a way, in merger control, for example, taking it seriously. It's already something that the European Commission was doing, and many of the competition authorities were taking into account innovation in our merger control. It was something that we were really assessing. So I think that the framework is flexible enough to allow for that. It's good to have a view on whether, for example, we are paying attention sufficiently to dynamic efficiencies, which is something that at national levels, some competition authorities are doing, maybe not that much as European scale, but in a way, I mean, it's good timing in order to do so. But honestly, I think that we have to, what we have to pay attention to is whether the structure of the market, and the structure of the market will be this market in particular, so you have to analyze the market, has those drivers. I mean, whether you have innovation, whether you have data access, whether you have this, and then with the framework that we have, pay attention to all those elements in the dynamics. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Martin, do you think that we can take into account such issues like innovation or dynamic efficiencies in our merger control, or is there something that we need to do to revisit our system of merger control? By our, I'm saying the European system on which national systems are largely modeled.
Well, I think we are boringly aligned on this topic. I would like to give kind of a slightly different perspective on this, just to explain also to the audience on what we actually do from on a day-to-day basis. So when we're looking at cartels and abuse of dominance, we look in the past and we look for facts and we can measure certain effects. So if there was a cartel, we can, and that started 10 years ago, we can look what happened to the prices as a result, and we can show, okay, there was an agreement, we have witnesses, we have documents, and there was an effect because prices increased. So that it's backward, relatively easy backward-looking work, where you can have you can come as close to the truth as possible. In merger control, it's completely different. We look at the current situation, and then we make a prediction about the future, which is in essence, always unsure. We don't know. We do our best, and we do this objectively. We do it based on the facts of today, but always with any prediction into the future, there is a high level of uncertainty whether we get it right. And therefore, we should also be very careful taking into account potential benefits in the future. And I would say that generally, let's err on the side of competition so that we protect competition. It helps, it works. And with the benefits, we have to be extremely reluctant. And in merger control, that is even more important than with regard to agreements. Because, so if two parties decide to set up a venture or to work together in a certain system, basically maybe to recycle products or to develop a new product, if and when prices rise as a result of it and the benefits do not materialize, the competition authority can tell the companies, you have to stop. And you have to stop with the agreement, and then you also stop the harm. With mergers, that's impossible. We cannot tell the companies, well, we looked at your merger and the benefits didn't materialize, so you have to unwind the merger. That's not how it works. And I think that makes it reasonable for competition authorities to be pretty conservative about taking on board benefits. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't take them on board at all. And I think there is some room for development of the merger guidelines, development of our practice, because it's the current efficiency defense in merger control is interpreted relatively strictly, so strict that I don't think any company has ever met the burden of proof. And maybe there is some room for new efficiencies, for new benefits. But again, I caution for opening the gates here because of the inherent unpredictability and incapability of competition authorities to predict the future.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, understood. Absolutely caution. Rigo, do you think the theories of harm that you're using at the Hungarian competition authority are sufficient, or do you think that we need to move a little bit forward from them?
Yes, more work needs to be done on theory of harm. I agree with Martin. Merger control is about the future. Merger control is built on a hidden assumptions that problematic mergers usually involve large companies. That is why we set turnover thresholds, but two new issues challenge this. First, some companies are small today with modest revenues, but they may shape the future, especially in digital sector. Acquiring them early can remove important future rivals. Think of big tech companies who love acquire startups. Second, serial acquisitions and industry roll-ups can gradually create dominance. Each individual deal looks harmless, but together they can close markets and harm consumers. This is why I believe we may need to revisit our approach. In Hungary, for example, since 2017, we have had a call-in option to review mergers below the thresholds. Such tools require resources because authorities must monitor markets and potentially handle more cases, but they can prevent harmful concentrations from slipping through the net. I am sure more work needs to be done on theories of harm. New theories of harm linked to the innovation or sustainability have already been applied several times. new concepts have also emerged, such as the ecosystem theory of harm. I believe this is an area that will require further development and research in the near future. And 2 weeks ago in Hungary, a foreign company buy only 49% of a pharmaceutical sector, but in this way bought 200 pharmacy. These companies only under the radar. I love method in Germany and Austria. I think these kind of companies need to be registered to the authority or Bundeskartellamt or for you. I think it is an important question also. Under threshold by only 29, but influence the future. And maybe abuse of dominance is coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. I'd like to ask a question to our co-panelists. Given that there's been so much discussion about the DMA and about ex-ante enforcement and a lot of criticism on the DMA, do you think that as a general rule we can have a balanced approach between ex-ante and ex-post enforcement? Do you think that within the realm of competition law we can have a balance in this approach and achieve the goals and the benefits of competition law? Does it have to be either one? Would you like to?
Well, by the way, merger control is ex ante. And it's the most useful tool for me, because we all see how long it takes to go for an abuse proceeding, and my policymakers always tell me, well, if it is not handled by merger control, why don't you do an abuse proceeding where you investigate 2 years, then you go to court for 5 years? Yeah, okay, just wanted to mention it. No, I think we can have a balanced approach, and I think that is important, it matters. We see sometimes that competition law won't do. We've seen that in the digital realm. We have taken the decision in Germany that we set up kind of a special provision on digital markets, Section 19A. The Commission has taken another path with the DMA, the DSA, the AI Act, the Data Act. Did we talk about deregulation yet? Well, so there are lots of acts ex ante, and I think in some areas where competition law is not sufficient, because it's always looking at the past, difficult to get your cases through court, and I think the digital area is one of these areas where it is very helpful to have some ex-ante tools like we have in Europe. And for the first time ever, that we must acknowledge, we see things moving in the digital area. For the first time ever, there's an additional iOS app shop. For the first time ever, also, we in Germany, with our Section 19A, we have reopened the market with our Google Maps case. We have reopened the market for European providers of digital maps at a point where the market was about to tip. So we have really done some good for the European digital market. So yes, I think we must take a balanced approach. We should take care that competition law is first, but in case it is not sufficient, I think it can be helpful, like in any other regulated industry, also to be regulating, but not over-regulating.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're slightly running out of time, but I would like to ask my co-panelists if you'd add something onto this, or yes, well, please.
Yeah,
sorry, Natalie.
No.
No, I think just if there is a call about laxing merger control rules, I think when we look at the digital markets, I think we rather have to make the debate did we enforce enough, and did we have under enforcement in merger control, and did we fail in a way in merger control, allowing too many mergers to happen? I think that will be an equally important debate, because that's if merger control fails, which is like the first line of defense against markets losing contestability, then you still have abuse of dominance. But if that doesn't work, you need regulation, and regulation always has a cost on the economy. But it may be the only tool that's left if nothing else works. If the traditional toolbox doesn't work. I think the challenge with the DMA is, of course, that it's partly self-enforcing, but of course it also takes a lot of resources at the European level, and the European Commission didn't get, I think, additional resources to do this, and contrary to the system we have in enforcement of 101 and 102 and the regular antitrust tools, where we are the European Competition Network and we share the burden and we can work together. For the DMA, enforcement is solely with the European Commission. I mean, it may be revisited in 10, 15 years, but for the moment it's like that. And I think that it still takes a lot of resources, and we have to see how we can support the Commission in this.
Thank you very much. Martin, you would like to?
I just wanted to add is that we, over the past years, we shifted resources from cartel enforcement and abuse of dominance enforcement to merger control, but also to market studies, and to review markets and look into markets whether they are functioning. And here I think is an important role for competition authorities. We tend to focus on the problems, on the market failures. But with the market studies we conducted over the past year, I came to realize that we also have a role to play if markets are actually functioning well. It must be the same in Greece as in other countries. There are myths going around. People think that prices are too high, or that some people make huge margins, some companies make huge margins. For us, as fact-based competition authorities, we also have an important role to bust these myths and to say, well, actually, we looked at the prices and we looked at the margins, but they are okay. And we've done this a couple of times, and I was a bit worried about what would happen, whether the public would say, but we don't believe you, or you are not impartial, you're probably defending the companies. But by and large, I think we went out very well. And what happened as a result of this, that we could explain that margins of companies work at a competitive level, is that it also consumers regained trust in the markets. And trust in markets is extremely important for economic development, is extremely important for stability in society that is already polarized. So a role that we can play as competition authorities is not only looking at things that go wrong, but also to look at things that are right, but by the public are perceived as wrong, and tell everyone about it. So, and that's difficult. So I also tell my staff at the agency, who are very much, they're almost disappointed if they cannot find a market failure. And I say, no, this is good. This is a good result. We can tell the public that it's okay. And that is also a value that competition authorities can add to society.
Are you going to put a question? If you are, I prefer questions from the public. Otherwise, I will do a comment.
I would just, yes, I would like a comment. We have very few minutes. Maybe we could have just a couple, one question maybe, but I would...
Okay, then I will do it very quick. We are a competition authority and also a regulator. And when striking the right balance to one or the other, we do what Martin was saying. We look at the markets. And if we see that the regulation is not needed anymore, we deregulate. And we are doing that in telecoms, for example, where over the 24-something markets that were regulated, now we have just one market. And maybe we are recreating another one where we see some problems. But with the digital, I think we could say that the tipping of the markets that we were experiencing almost amounted to a market failure. And that is why if we cannot deal with competition, you need something else. So yeah, strike the balance, but by looking at the markets and how they work. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say that we have followed the example of the Netherlands Competition Authority in our market study for bank deposits. And this is something that we try to do following roughly what you have done, to actually look at this market and see how it's working and see what we're going to recommend that will be coming out next month. And on your other point, Martin, that we have looked at markets and we have found no problem. And we are actually quite worried about what might happen when we bring out the result. But I think it was part of communicating and being transparent, and it was very well received. So thank you very much. We have about 2.5 minutes remaining before the end of this amazing opportunity to truly have the heads of authorities shaping competition policy in Europe here with us to discuss such a wide range of topics. I would like to invite maybe one or two questions from the audience to our esteemed speakers and panelists. Okay. I do not see a question. Okay. I think that everybody wants to think about what we have all said. It's certainly a lot. It's very important for us, for you to be here. I think that we went through a range of topics, from why we're doing what we're doing, why it's important for competition law to be here, why we have to be important, why we have to communicate what we do, why the single market has to be a part of what we're doing, why we might have to reassess some parts, refine merger control policy, but under-enforcement might be an issue more than having over-enforced and set in the way of some national champion, why communication matters, what we're doing with our market studies, how we're trying to reach out to our fellow citizens and do something good for our countries. I would like to thank you for being here with us, for sharing your insights, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Hara. Thank you.
Thank you very much.